Hi, it's Greg Hurrell here with another Vim screencast. So in the last screencast I was talking about the tab key, and I've got more to say about it now, specifically in the context of auto-completion and snippets. So the tools that I use to do these two tasks are autocomplete, and I'll have a link to this in the notes under the screencast. This is an incredibly powerful completion engine. It's very hard to install, but totally worth it. I use Ultisnips for snippets. This is somewhat easier to install. It does require that Vim is compiled with Python support. But other than that, it's not too onerous. It's a fantastic tool. The hard part can be getting these two things to play nicely together, especially if you want to use the tab key for everything, which is what I do want to do. So I'll show you what they look like when they play together. I'm going to start by opening a test file. So that will do. So I've got some Ultisnip snippets set up that are only active in test files. So I can type BEF to provide me with a snippet for a before block. You'll notice that I can see a completion menu here as well. So that's provided by autocomplete, but it's integrated well with Ultisnips. If I hit tab, I get the before block. Other examples of snippets would be for logging. I can create functions. Those functions can have placeholders where I can just tab between the places in the placeholders in the thing. I can do fairly complex things like hit CC to do a React create class call with a sensible default provided for the module name based on the file that I'm in. I can just replace this if I want, like so. Hit tab, move in here and continue typing. I can add documentation with ** tab. Or if I already had some text, I could just select that visually, hit tab, ** tab again, and it is turned into a documentation block. I can do this recursively too, even though it doesn't make any sense, which is kind of funny. So one thing to note about this is that you can effectively run arbitrary code with these. So let's say that I have one of these React create class calls here, and I want to add a so-called lifecycle component, lifecycle callback method like should component update. So I'll do SCU for should component update and hit tab, and I get this using nice object property syntax. You'll notice there's a key and there's a value, which is a function, and there's a trailing comma. However, if I had done this using a React ES6 class, like so, and I do should component update tab, you notice that it produced a class method. So Ultisnips is pretty powerful because it enables me to run arbitrary code to decide what is going to be inserted. So I'll show you what that looks like. Ultisnips edit. You can see here a bunch of JavaScript snippets. If I go for CC create class, it is going to create a class, but I actually want to see should component update. So you can see here I've got this test here. It's actually running Python code. That's what the bang p means. It's going to do this React ES6 test, and depending on whether or not that's true, it's going to insert colon function or not, and then the function body. And similarly with the create class thing that I showed you before, which is down here, you can see that it's doing this on-the-fly snippet extension where it tries to use the base name of the file in here, and if it can, it inserts that as a placeholder. Otherwise, it just defaults to module name. For example, if you don't have a saved file, it would have put module name. So you can do a lot of really powerful stuff with this, and what I've shown only scratches the surface, but it's definitely worth diving into. So now the question comes, how do you get these things to integrate nicely together, and what are the problems with integration? I can probably show you this by going to my plugin autocomplete. I am not in the right directory, so I'm going to go to the right directory, open Vim, plugin autocomplete. So this is where I have most of my settings related to autocomplete, me, and Ultisnips. I'm basically going to let Ultisnips have the tab key to do both snippet expansion and also jump between placeholders and snippets. Shift tab to go back between placeholders. If you're using a recent version of Ultisnips, you're going to be able to set up an auto command like this one to register for callbacks when you enter a snippet and when you leave a snippet. And I'll show you what that. I'll show you what that does presently. So we want to look at autocomplete. Autocomplete. So setup mappings, basically in all of these modes, we're going to take whatever the jump forward trigger is, which is tab, and map it to these expand or jump functions. Expand or jump is defined down here. Basically, it does a bunch of logic around whether or not the pop-up menu is visible, and it's going to decide on the basis of all these ugly conditionals whether or not it should jump forwards or fall through to allow autocomplete to handle the key press. So if I go back to the file where I was before, we can see that I've mapped some things for autocomplete as well. So down and up, Control-J and Control-K to move between completions, Control-Y to accept completion. I think that's actually the default Vim binding for that. And I don't think there's anything else too relevant in here. Okay, so let's look at how this actually works in practice. I'll pick a snippet that has an expansion like function. I think I need to be in a JavaScript file for this to work. So let's open a JavaScript file and type function. And you'll see how I can type stuff in here and use tab to move between placeholders like so. The problem lies wherein autocomplete wants to compete with multi-snips for control over what should happen when you hit the tab key. So I'll show you what that means. If I complete function again and start typing S to STU, at this point autocomplete jumps in and offers to complete stuff for me. So normally in multi-snips, tab would take me to the next placeholder. But when the pop-up menu is visible, I actually want autocomplete to get that key press. So what do I do now? Now that I've selected the auto-completion target that I want, I still want to be able to move to the next placeholder. But if I hit tab, autocomplete is going to keep getting this, and if I hit shift tab, it's going to move back through the list. So that's where I use the default key binding of Control-Y to move to the next placeholder. And there I can hit tab to replace it with whatever I want, and tab again to go to the next placeholder. So this is subtle and kind of hard to demonstrate, but if you try to use these two things together without this functionality, it could drive you crazy. So I'm going to provide a link to the various bits of config in my .files so that you can look at it and steal bits from it if you want. One thing that you will need in order to make this work is a patch on autocomplete. So I've got that here in my .files. I'll also provide a link to this. It's a fork of the autocomplete repo. You really only just need this commit. Basically, lengthy explanation there that I won't reiterate here that explains why we kind of need this, but then enables Control-Y to work in autocomplete. So that is getting the tab key to work well with autocomplete and Ultisnips. Both fantastic tools, totally worth investing in. I hope you've enjoyed this, and tune in again in the future for another screencast.